Did you ever have it happen where you kind of realize something, sort of stumble upon a thought or an observation, and it hits you, and you just think to yourself, how did that happen? When did that come to be? Kind of like the idea of the offensive line maybe being Pitt's strongest position in 2023? What? How did that happen? Well, we'll talk about it here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's Wednesday. It's the midweek edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You know the website below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All of the Pitt sports news that you need and want, the latest and greatest coverage that you're going to find, Panther-Lair.com. Pitt football, basketball, and recruiting. It's all there at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. I really do think that's one of the biggest selling points with the site is those message boards and where Pitt fans can hang out and talk to other Pitt fans. You are a Pitt fan. You like to talk about Pitt sports, and the best place to do it is right there at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I mean, there's literally Pitt fans talking about Pitt sports all day, every day on the boards right there. And so if you're a Pitt fan, you want to talk to other Pitt fans, that's the place to do it, Panther-Lair.com. And you know what we always ask you to do right here on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to the YouTube page. The like button's down there. It's a big thumbs up. The subscribe button is right around the area where I'm pointing. Click both of those. I would really appreciate it. Want to keep those numbers going on each video and our subscriber base. I mean, I think a pretty significant percentage of the people who watch these videos are not subscribed to our YouTube page. So why not just help us out? Hit the subscribe button, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We give you these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We have the live Panther-Lair show every Wednesday night. We have recruit interviews, player interviews, post-practice highlights, post-practice interviews, all kinds of stuff at Panther-Lair or at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe so you never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. If you've been following along, for the last few weeks, we've been going position by position and previewing each position on the team, heading toward the season, heading toward the start of training camp in a few weeks. Last week, we talked about the tight ends, and that was dark and dismal. We talked about the wide receivers the week before that. That wasn't much better. Running backs the week before that, and quarterbacks the week before that, which started this whole thing. And it's sort of in conjunction with coverage that we're doing on Panther-Lair.com. Every day of the week, Monday through Friday, we have a different angle we're taking with each position group. There's 5 questions on the position group. There's sort of a personnel breakdown, who left the roster, who joined the roster. There's the depth chart and kind of how the depth chart is projected to look. There's the top 5 players at that position group over the last of the Narduzzi era, so over the last 8 years. And then on Friday, we do a bold prediction about the position group. And kind of in conjunction with that, we've been here on Wednesdays on the Morning Pitt breaking down the position group sort of overall, kind of summing all those things up to some extent over the course of about 20 minutes here on the Morning Pitt. And so we're up to the offensive line, our final offensive position before we switch over to the other side of the ball. And if the last couple weeks with talking about the receivers and the tight ends were kind of dismal and a bummer, I think this week's a lot better because, like I said at the beginning of the video, there's a real chance that if you were ranking the position groups on this year's roster, not like the last 2 days where I ranked the position groups over the 8 years of Pat Narduzzi, but if you were just ranking the position groups on this year's roster in terms of talent, experience, depth, and just overall how good that unit should be, I mean, offensive line, it's no worse than 3rd, and I'm pretty sure it's not number 3. I mean, I think O-line is pretty high on the list. I mean, your contention or competition, I should say, for that the top spots if you're going to rank the position groups. I mean, I think cornerback is up there with Marquez Williams and A.J. Woods and M.J. Devonshire. I'm still of the mind that linebacker is pretty high on the list. Maybe because I'm pretty high on the linebackers. I think Bengali Kamara and Shane Simon and Solomon DeShields will be really good this year. But after that, I'm not sure what position group you would put above the offensive line. And quite frankly, I'm not sure you would put the linebackers above the offensive line. I mean, if you want to put the corners number 1 and the O-line number 2, I won't argue with you. If you want to put the O-line really any lower than that, you're going to get some disagreement from me. And I think the big part, a big part of the reason why I am so bullish on this group of offensive linemen is because everybody's back. Everybody's back. Marcus Minor is the one starter who's not returning from last season. And it's a remarkable place to be right now. It's a remarkable position for this offensive line to be in because 2 years ago, prior to last season, everybody was excited because all these guys were coming back as super seniors. Carter Warren was coming back, and Owen Drexel was coming back, and Gabe Hoy was coming back, and Marcus Minor was coming back, in addition to Jake Cradle. And so you had all these starters returning, and 4 of them were super seniors, 6th-year senior offensive linemen. It's a coach's dream. But the quiet part that nobody was really saying out loud when all those guys announced that they were coming back was, well, that's great, but now you're just sort of kicking the can down the road, and I think we talked about that. That inevitable day of reckoning when you're going to have to transition into younger offensive linemen or that next generation of offensive linemen. It was going to happen in 2022, but all those guys decided to come back. And so now instead of 22, it was going to happen in 2023. And so it was kind of like the dark cloud, right? That didn't overshadow the excitement surrounding all those guys coming back, but it definitely, it would get brought up from time to time. Be like, well, this is great, but what's it going to look like next year when all those guys are gone because they're in their last year of eligibility? But then a funny thing happened. All those guys got hurt. Gabe Hoy missed games early in the season. Owen Drexel missed games mid to late season, middle through the end. Carter Warren only played a handful of games. And when it came down to it, all those super seniors who returned never played a single snap together. There was never a snap when all 5 of the returning starters from 2021 were on the field together in 2022. I'm talking about Carter Warren, Gabe Hoy, Marcus Minor, Owen Drexel, Jake Cradle, and wait, did I just name them all? Carter Warren, Marcus Minor, Owen Drexel, Jake Cradle, and Gabe Hoy. There was never a snap when all 5 of those guys played together last season. Now, that's a bad thing. That's a downside, right? Except the silver lining to that particular dark cloud is that all of a sudden you got a lot of guys, a lot of experience. Blake Zubovic played a ton. Matt Gonsalves played a ton. Branson Taylor played a ton. Ryan Jacoby played a lot. Although Jacoby mostly played as a tight end and extra offensive lineman, when they decided to do that, he didn't play quite as much as Gonsalves and Taylor and Zubovic. And then Jake Cradle got a ton of snaps at center. And so out of this unfortunate situation of all these guys getting hurt and missing time, and you're losing all your returning starting offensive linemen, and you never get a single snap out of all 5 of them playing together, you instead end up being even better positioned for 2023 and not really sacrificing all that much last season. I had the stat, I think it broke down to like 147 in the month of November last year, 147 running plays by Pitt's running backs, 147, and 111 dropbacks. And on those 147 rushing attempts by the running backs in November, last November, when Pitt went 4-0, they had 2 carries where they lost yardage out of 147. And on the 111 dropbacks by Keaton Slovis in the month of November last year, he was sacked twice. So 258 plays, 4 negative plays. Now, I mean, we're not counting like screen passes that lost a yard or something, but negative plays that we would attribute to the offensive line. Penetration in the backfield leading to a play for a loss. There were 4 out of 258 offensive plays. Now, maybe Izzy Abanikanda and Rodney Hammond were just making things happen. Maybe Keaton Slovis was keeping plays alive with his dazzling footwork and speed and all that stuff. But I'm inclined to give a whole heck of a lot of credit to the offensive line for that success. David Hale from ESPN had a stat about Keaton Slovis was, I think, tops in the ACC in the most amount of time between snap and first pressure. He was getting time. He was protected back there. There were a lot of issues in Pitt's passing game, but I don't think the protection was chief among them. Maybe early in the season when they were trying to get these guys acclimated, when guys weren't healthy and guys weren't ready and they were using different guys, maybe early in the season, but by the end of the year, that unit was playing really, really well. And now if I line up an offensive line left to right of Branson Taylor, Ryan Jacoby, Jake Cradle, Blake Zabovic, and Matt Gonsalves, I feel great about that group. I mean, don't you feel good about that group? You've got 2 sixth-year seniors, a couple of fifth-year. I think Jacoby's a fifth-year senior. He might be a fourth-year junior this year. No, he's a fifth-year senior, just like Gonsalves. And then Taylor's a fourth-year junior. So you've got a fourth-year junior, 2 fifth-year seniors, and 2 sixth-year seniors to make up your starting lineup. All guys with starting experience. All guys who played a ton last year, and all guys who played a ton next to each other last year. It's one of the great cliches and adages in college football, in all football, that continuity and cohesiveness are key to successful offensive line play. And you've got all these guys having worked together a lot and playing well together last year. I mean, it's hard not to be enthusiastic about that group. And of course, I haven't even mentioned Ryan Baer yet. And I've repeated this a bunch of times over the course of the last, July, probably the last 6 months, at least the last 4 months, 3 months since spring camp. But what you really have when you throw Ryan Baer into the mix, and Baer's a redshirt freshman, very young guy, only got limited snaps last year, but his ceiling is as high as anybody else on the team. He's the best offensive line prospect that Pat Narduzzi has signed in 8 years. He might get passed by Caleb Holmes in that regard, depending on how Holmes' senior season goes. But through the first 8 recruiting classes under Narduzzi, Ryan Baer is number 1 among the offensive line prospects. And there's been no indication from the staff or his teammates that his first year on campus did anything to dispel the notion of him being number 1 among those offensive line prospects. And we've laid this out a bunch of times before of the scenarios that could play out. Ryan Baer is going to be on the left side of the line. So he's in competition with Branson Taylor and Ryan Jacoby for the tackle or the guard spot. Now, Baer can play either one. And because he's got the versatility to play tackle or guard, it gives the coaches, it gives Dave Borbely the option to truly play the best lineman. And as we've said, as we've laid it out a bunch of times, if you look at those 3 guys, you look at Branson Taylor, Ryan Baer, and Ryan Jacoby, and if you're 2 best out of those 3, because those 3 are competing for 2 spots, if the 2 best out of those 3 are Baer and Jacoby, then Ryan Baer's the left tackle and Jacoby's the left guard. If the 2 best out of those 3 are Taylor and Jacoby, then Taylor's the left tackle and Jacoby's the left guard. If the 2 best out of those 3 are Taylor and Baer, then Taylor's the left tackle and Baer's the left guard. And quite frankly, you could probably flip them because I think Branson Taylor could probably play left guard as well. All of that together means that they've got even more options to find the best 5 offensive linemen. And you can go another step forward and say, if something happens to somebody, if Taylor gets hurt or Jacoby gets hurt on the left side, and probably even those guys on the right side of Zabovic and Gonsalves, if one of those guys gets hurt, basically anybody other than the center, Ryan Baer can step in for them and have the best offensive line recruit of the Pat Narduzzi era marching in. And that's if Baer is not in the starting lineup to begin with. So I guess what I'm saying is not only do they have a proven starting 5 on the offensive line, they've actually, they go 6. They go to 6 when you throw in Ryan Baer. And then, to fill out 7, 8, 9, you've got guys like Jason Collier, who's a 5th-year senior. You've got Terrence Enos and Dorian Ford, who moved from defensive tackle to the offensive line. Terrence Moore, who moved from center to tackle this spring. And the reason he moved from center to tackle this spring is because B.J. Williams, the true freshman, was so good at center. And B.J. Williams may end up being the backup center on the, when this season starts. Jackson Brown comes in as a transfer from Cal as a redshirt freshman. They've got a bunch of guys to fill out those spots. They don't quite have the depth that they had last year, where they had Gonsalves and Taylor and Jacoby as your top 3 reserve and Zabovic as your top 4 reserve offensive linemen. They don't quite have that. But with the 5 they've got, which I would contend are at least as good, if not better, than the 5 that they hoped to have last year, with the 5 they've got, plus Baer, they're starting off at, I think, an even better spot than they were under the best case scenario a year ago. And maybe, maybe you look at it and you say, well, it's crazy. Like, how could you say that they're better than they were a year ago? They had Carter Warren got drafted last year. And, how could you, and Marcus Minor was a first team all ACC offensive lineman. I look at this year's projected offensive line. I think Matt Gonsalves is a draft pick, probably this year. I think this, and this is not inside information or sourced or anything, this is just my guess, is that he's going to play this final year and then go to the NFL, be a draft pick. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a top 3 or 4 round draft pick. I wouldn't be surprised if he's an all ACC first team selection. Zubovic and Cradle, we'll see about those guys when they get to the NFL process and how they can do. Cradle maybe has a good shot as a center. And then I think Ryan Baer is a draft pick down the road. I think Branson Taylor can play himself into a draft pick down the road. I think there are you have the potential to have multiple NFL offensive linemen on this roster and in the starting lineup. And it's been a while since you could really say that. I mean, you look over the draft picks, Dorian Johnson and Adam Bisnavati both were drafted in 2017. So those guys played together, and they had Brian O'Neill. So, I mean, you had 3 NFL draft picks on the 2016 offensive line in Johnson, Bisnavati, and O'Neill. And those guys have the hardware to back it up. They were all ACC first team picks. Bisnavati in 2015 and 16, Johnson in 16, Brian O'Neill a year later in 2017. They all got drafted. Johnson went in the 4th round. Bisnavati went in the 6th. O'Neill was a 2nd round pick. I think Jimmy Morrissey was actually on. Wait, Jimmy Morrissey was not in 2000. Let me do the math here. His final year, I think, was 19, 18, 17. So, yeah, so they didn't all overlap. You didn't have 4 NFL draft picks playing on those lines, but you had a bunch. And I think you got the potential to have that kind of roster and pro potential this year. I also think you've got a chance to have the best offensive line of the Narduzzi era. The competition there is 2016 with Johnson, Bisnavati, and O'Neill. The 2021 offensive line was obviously very good. Carter Warren got drafted out of that group. He was a second all-ACC second team pick, but I mean, that group was, they were good. They were a big part of why Pitt had the success that they had. I think they'll be even better this year. I think at worst, this year's offensive line ends up as the second best offensive line in the Narduzzi era, and they're chasing down 2016 to see if they can capture the title as the best. And all of this, I think, bodes incredibly well for Phil Dracovic, Rodney Hammond, Sebo Flemister, Derek Davis, Daniel Carter, TJ Harbison, Montrevious Lloyd, Christian Bear. Quarterbacks and running backs should be able to excel behind this offensive line. I think it's going to be a strength of the team this year. Second year working in this offense, second year working with these blocking schemes, and I think you look at how they were playing by the end of the year, there's no reason to think they can't pick that up and carry it over into 2023. And if you're talking about the transition for Phil Dracovic, you're talking about the transition for Rodney Hammond. You've got 2 guys in the backfield who are going to be in prominent roles for the first time with this team. How can they do? Can they pick up, can they carry the offense? I don't know. I don't know what Dracovic can do. I don't know what Hammond can do in a full-time role. But I believe in this offensive line, and that's going to give those 2 guys, it's going to give Dracovic and Hammond a great chance to succeed in 2023. So is the offensive line the number 1 position group on the team? I'll give the nod to the corners, but not by much. The offensive line's not far behind. Not far at all. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Sound off in the comments or on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Am I overstating the case with the offensive line? And if I'm right about it, how good can this team be? Because it seems like if you have a great offensive line, which this team should have, ceiling gets pretty high. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. You can put your comments there on the message boards and interact with us as we talk about position groups heading toward the 2023 season. Make sure you stay tuned here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. And yeah, head over to the website, Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for watching today. We appreciate it. Hope you've had a great week so far. We're at the midpoint of the week. Only a couple more days until the weekend. So have a great week, or have a great Wednesday, I should say. Don't forget, tonight, the live Panther Lair show, 8:30 p.m. We'll be doing that. Me and Jim Hammett talking about all things Pitt sports. So we'll talk to you then. We'll see you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.